Good evening, my fellow Americans.
He wanted the United States to be a great society. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're taking a look at the life and accomplishments of Lyndon Johnson.
Tonight I want to speak to you of peace in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. No other question so preoccupies our people.
Lyndon Baines Johnson was born August 27, 1908, in Stonewall, Texas. The oldest of 5 siblings, he became interested in politics while at the Southwest Texas State Teachers College. There, he also developed his persuasion skills during campus debates and forged a relationship with the Mexican-American community by teaching impoverished students.
You never forget what poverty and hatred can do when you see its scars on the hopeful face of a young child.
Following his 1930 graduation, his father's connections helped LBJ become Democratic Congressman Richard M. Kleberg's legislative secretary, where he built relationships with lawmakers and politicians like President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Over the next years, Johnson attended Georgetown University Law Center and married Claudia Alta Taylor, with whom he had 2 daughters. In 1937, Lady Bird Johnson, as she was known, provided financial and political support during her husband's successful campaign for Congress. Johnson dedicated his time in the House to improving his district, though he spent a few months as a Navy lieutenant commander during World War II following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. In 1948, Johnson won a spot in the Texas State Senate after a contentious campaign and advanced rapidly to become House Minority Leader in 1953. Johnson was so skilled at pushing his agenda and gathering information on his fellow senators that his methods were dubbed the treatment. In 1955, Johnson's 60-cigarette-per-day habit caught up with him when he almost died from a massive heart attack, causing him to quit smoking. LBJ continued following his political ambitions in 1960 by canvassing for the Democratic presidential candidacy. Though he lost to John F. Kennedy, he did become his running mate. Later that year, Johnson helped win over the South when the JFK-LBJ ticket defeated Dwight Eisenhower in the election. Johnson felt underused as vice president and disliked by Kennedy's entourage. Rumors circulated that JFK planned to drop LBJ from the 1964 ticket, but things changed on November 22, 1963.
At 12:30 p.m. come the rifle shots that bring death to President Kennedy.
Following Kennedy's assassination in Dallas, Johnson was sworn in as the 36th President of the United States aboard Air Force One.
I will do my best. That is all I can do.
During his first year, Johnson established the Warren Commission to examine JFK's murder and honored him by pushing through 1964's Civil Rights Act.
Americans of every race and color have worked to build a nation of widening opportunities.
This was one of the first major achievements of Johnson's Great Society agenda, which was designed to combat poverty, racial discrimination, and more. On November 3, 1964, LBJ and running mate Hubert Humphrey won the election by a landslide against Republican Barry Goldwater. Johnson's Great Society programs continued with 1965's Voting Rights Act.
It is wrong, deadly wrong, to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
He focused much of his mandate on solving poverty through education, by giving public education access to federal funding, for example. He also increased health benefits through Medicare and Medicaid, expanded American immigration policies, and tackled culture, the environment, and the media, which eventually led to the establishment of public broadcasting. However, when poor neighborhoods saw little improvement, African American communities began rioting violently. Growing media criticism of the country's military participation in the Vietnam War exacerbated those problems. Following 1964's notorious Gulf of Tonkin resolution, LBJ began sending American forces to Vietnam without Senate approval to stop the spread of communism. While publicly, Johnson's administration claimed impending victory, the U.S. was shocked by 1968's surprise Tet Offensive attacks by the Communists. LBJ's credibility and popularity plummeted further as spending, protests, and deaths increased. The final straw for Johnson was the subsequent rift within the Democratic Party. He decided not to run for the presidency in 1968 and eventually ended all bombing of North Vietnam to set peace talks in motion.
I do not believe that I should devote an hour or a day of my time to any personal partisan causes or to any duties other than the awesome duties of this office.
The country was shattered further by the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy in 1968. In a political realignment, the public chose Republican Richard Nixon as president later that year. After leaving office, Johnson retired to his Texas ranch and worked on his memoirs. He also resumed his smoking habit, which caused his health to deteriorate further until he died on January 22, 1973, following his third heart attack.
The 36th President of the United States died this afternoon in an ambulance plane on the way to San Antonio, where he was taken after being stricken at his ranch, the LBJ Ranch in Johnson City, Texas.
While he was criticized for the Vietnam War, his use of wiretapping, and his ruthless Johnson treatment, Lyndon Johnson is remembered positively for his domestic policies and as a hero in the fight for civil rights.
Its purpose is not to punish. Its purpose is not to divide, but to end divisions. Divisions which have lasted all too long.